What were the best moments of the 2024-2025 New York Rangers season? Were there any?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1317 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, Jon Chik. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, first of all, right off the bat here, a quick confession. As far as that intro that I just delivered is concerned, yes, there were actually a couple of fun wins this season, some interesting moments, some nice single game performances from certain players in the New York Rangers, some instances, some wins, some moments that actually made you believe that this team actually cared, actually might push its way into a playoff spot this season. Ultimately, that did not happen, but there were some good moments this season, a lot fewer this year than in some other seasons with the New York Rangers as fans of this team. But nevertheless, I think it would still be a nice thing to do. We're at the end of the week here. Let's go ahead and celebrate the end of the week by reliving some of the better moments of the New York Rangers season, specifically what I consider to be the best 5 victories of 2024-2025 for the New York Rangers. We'll go ahead and just dive right into the countdown here. Number 5, I'm going with the Sam Rosen game. The Rangers beat the Lightning 4-0. Final game of the final game of the regular season. No, it's just the final game of the season. They beat the Lightning 4-0. And everything that happened in that game for myself and probably for a lot of you as well was very, very secondary to saying goodbye to Sam Rosen and making sure to just appreciate his work, appreciate him just kind of do his thing for one last game here. It's really unfortunate that it had to end the way that it did for Sam Rosen, with this team obviously having just a miserably disappointing season and missing the playoffs and all that. But if nothing else, we at least knew that this would be his last game. We could kind of prepare for it ahead of time. And like I said, that was his night, as it should have been. Just an amazing career, 40 years with the Rangers. The Rangers did what they did all season to honor him in different ways. And even when the Rangers were on the road, other teams were going out of their way to honor Sam Rosen. And you really get a mix of emotions, watching this final game that Sam Rosen is going to be the play-by-play voice of the New York Rangers. First of all, I think you're happy in a way that he's going out on his own terms, and he's going out at a time when he's still a top-notch, top-tier elite announcer in this sport, really the world of professional sports at large. That's obviously a nice feeling. And I think, if you've been a fan of this Ranger team for any amount of time, you're probably just happy that you got to live through this, because there's future Ranger fans on the way that haven't gotten into hockey yet, that might not even have been born yet. But they'll be able to go back and see highlights and everything, but they won't get to see Sam Rosen calling New York Ranger games on a night in and night out basis the way that all of us did for, in some cases, 40 years, in some cases, maybe a little bit less than that. But I think all of us certainly enjoyed Sam Rosen's work for the most part. There's always, somebody always has to go against the grain, and they'll, say, I'm not a Sam Rosen fan. Yeah, okay, whatever you say. But Sam Rosen, for me, one of the best professional sports announcers of all time. But you go through all these different emotions. You might even be a little bit mad, not at Sam, obviously, but mad at the Rangers, because, again, I alluded to this just a second ago, but if the Rangers didn't have their heads up their you-know-whats the entire season and actually showed some effort and actually went out there and acted like they cared, then maybe they would have won enough games to make the playoffs. And maybe Sam Rosen would have gotten what he deserved, at least one more New York Ranger playoff appearance. Even if they eke their way in and they went nowhere, they lose in the first round with barely a whimper, at least he's there. At least he's getting to call playoff hockey one more time. And maybe, just maybe, if the Rangers had gotten into the playoffs, we would have gotten ourselves one more iconic Sam Rosen call. It's very, very difficult to have an iconic call in what is a meaningless regular season finale against Tampa Bay, a game in which your opponent isn't even really trying all that hard. They're just trying to get to the playoffs without, getting injured or anything like that. But it is what it is. You don't get the storybook ending for Sam Rosen, but it was a lot of fun to, hear him one last time here and just see him do his thing. As far as the game itself, I don't even remember that much. By this point, I was so beyond done with the veterans on this team, as I'm sure a lot of you were as well. For me, at this point, it was all about Sam Rosen and some of the young players. You did get Othman and Perreault both in the lineup at the same time. That was nice for a change at the end of this season. Matthew Robertson was out there. I was keeping an eye on him, given the fact that he finally made his NHL debut in the final 2 games of the season. And Igor ends up with a 27 save shutout, I should say. And it all adds up to a 4-0 shutout win for the Rangers. And Mika Zibanejad had 2 goals and an assist. A lot of people were joking about that now finally Mika Zibanejad decides to show up, right? But bottom line, they won. But for me, this is all about Sam Rosen. This is the Sam Rosen show, as it should have been. And I'm glad the Rangers, in a season where not a whole lot went right, at least they sent Sam Rosen out with a win in Madison Square Garden. That was very, very nice to see. We move on to number 4 on the list. We go from the final game of the regular season all the way back to the first game of the regular season. The Rangers come out on opening night and they thoroughly destroy the Pittsburgh Penguins in Pittsburgh, 6-0. This occurred on October 9th, 2024. It feels like a lifetime ago. I mean, it really does. First of all, it was sort of a long time ago. I mean, we're in the middle of May here and we're talking about October. So what is that, like 7 months, a little bit more than 7 months ago? So it's been a minute here. But when you think about like all the transformation that this team underwent this entire season, this is before Trouba was traded. It's before Kaka was traded. It's before Hito was traded. Mancini, Lindgren, Vesey, the list goes on and on. So obviously there were a lot of players on that team at the time. They're no longer here now. And what's funny about this game to me, I mean, first of all, it's obviously an enjoyable way to start the season, right? Beating anybody 6-0 is great, but doing it to Pittsburgh in their barn, that's a ton of fun. But in retrospect, like, I wonder, was this maybe like one of the worst things that could have happened to the Rangers this season? It sounds a little nuts on the surface, I'll give you that, because who wouldn't want to start a season that way? But I don't know. I mean, they went in there and they won with such little trouble and just breezed right by the Penguins that it almost makes you wonder, like, did these players think that, like, oh, man, this is going to be easy. We're going to be back in the Eastern Conference Final before we even know it? And not quite. That's obviously not the way that it went this season. I just wonder, like, and it's just one game. It's just one win. And again, it's hard to be upset about a 6-0 win, but did it kind of lull them into this false sense of security? It's a question only they can answer, but one that I think is at least worth tossing out there. Again, it was an awesome way to kick off the campaign. Little did we know what we were in for this season. It's fun at the time, at least. But, I mean, you're in a spot where I think Ranger fans couldn't wait for this season to get going. You're coming off of a tough Eastern Conference final loss to the eventual Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. And you've got most of your team back from the year before. And, man, let's hit the ground running and let's go in there and kick some butt. And that's exactly what the Rangers did. They win this game, as I said, 6-0. And then, overall, they got off to a decent start. I think they were like 12-4-1, 12-6-1, something like that before the wheels fell off. But obviously things went south for this night, at least, though. We had a ton of fun as Ranger fans watching them do their thing. Quick trivia question for everybody. Who had the first Ranger goal of the season that just concluded? I'll give you a second to think about it. I'll give you a little bit of a hint that it's not an obvious player. You have to think a little bit about it. It was Sam Carrick. He scored from Jacob Trouba and Johnny Brodzinski. Trouba took a shot from the point. Carrick deflected it home. So the Rangers are up in this game 1-0, just 2:24 into the action. And Carrick gets his first goal with the Rangers, just 2:24 into his New York Ranger tenure. Carrick had a nice season for the Rangers, and I'm glad he's going to be back this upcoming season. As far as like other highlights from this game, Lafreniere, Trocheck, and Panarin, they combined for 2 goals and 3 assists on this night. You think that they're going to have the same exact kind of season that they just had. Little did we know. Kreider scored a couple of goals. Going to be a big year for Chris Kreider. Kreider's going to have a great season for the Rangers. Riley Smith, he gets his first assist in his New York Ranger debut. That was his first point as a member of the Rangers. And he only ends up being here up until around the trade deadline. Something else that was cool was Victor Mancini making his NHL debut due to an injury to Ryan Lindgren. What's funny about that is that both of them were traded before the deadline this season. And a 31 save shutout for Igor Shesterkin. So really couldn't have gone any better. And one other thing that adds to the enjoyment of this game, at least for me and probably for a lot of you as well, are some of the comments that Brian Rust made during the offseason. It might have been during the Ranger playoff run last season, but the bottom line, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but Brian Rust basically said straight up that if the Penguins had made the playoffs last season, they would have beaten the Rangers in the first round. Now, I always say, you never know what's going to happen. You put any two NHL teams on the ice for a best of 7, you never really know for sure that this team is going to beat that team. This is a sport that does lend itself to upsets from time to time, but the gall of him to say that when his team flat out misses the playoffs, that, yeah, they would have just breezed past the New York Rangers in the first round. Again, never say never, but there is no reason to believe that the Pittsburgh Penguins team from last season would have beaten the New York Rangers team from last season, the President's Trophy winning Ranger team, the Ranger team that beat the Penguins 3 out of 4 times that season, the Ranger team that swept the Capitals, the Ranger team that took care of business against the Canes, and the Ranger team that went toe-to-toe with the Florida Panthers. I wonder if Brian Russ also thinks that, the Penguins, if they had made the playoffs this season, because guess what? They missed it again. If they had made the playoffs this season, that, they would have beaten the Florida Panthers in the first round, right? I guess you just got to win a couple of games in the regular season. You can start there, Brian. But that added to the enjoyment for me because he says they would have beaten the Rangers. The Rangers walk into their building, beat them 6-0, and basically just do an all-time mic drop there. But in just a second, we're going to keep everything rolling. Going to get into the top 3, a couple of division rivalry games, an overtime thriller. Get into all that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it is easy to lose track. That is where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. You've got all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch Money to check your finances, track spending, and even plan your long-term goals. Easy collaboration as well. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Gotta shout out the everydayers as always. We're eventually going to do an episode, probably won't be the next one, but we'll shift our attention to the top 5 worst losses of the season for the Rangers, and that's going to be tough, trying to pick out a top 5 of that group, that's for sure. Also going to continue talking about some potential UFA targets for the Rangers. In our most recent episode, we talked about Sam Bennett, Trent Frederick, and Ivan Provorov. Mixed thoughts on all 3 of those guys. We also previously discussed Mitch Marner. Should be pretty easy to find, just the preceding episodes before this one. But we'll get to some more free agents in the next episode. Number 3, best win of the season for the New York Rangers. I'm going to go with a 4-3 win in Columbus against the Blue Jackets on February 8th. Just a really exciting game here. This was the final game that the Rangers played before the Four Nations break, and the Rangers were on the outside of the playoff picture looking in, as they were for the vast majority of the season, at least from like mid-November onward. They were on the outside looking in. They got back into that second wild card spot ever so briefly and then fell back out of it just as quickly and never recovered down the stretch this season. But this felt like a monster game for the Rangers because, again, you're a fringe playoff team. You're playing the Jackets, a team that you're chasing, also a fringe playoff team. And you've got a situation here where the Rangers rally out of a 1-goal deficit in the third period. They tie it, and then they win it very late. And what's kind of funny about this to me, as kind of like a quick aside here, the Blue Jackets went 1-3 against the Rangers this season. If the Jackets had won any of those 3 games that they lost and had done so in regulation or overtime, but not a shootout, they would have made the playoffs. They would have had the tiebreaker over Montreal for that final playoff spot. But I guess they just couldn't deal with those pesky Rangers, right? But it is what it is. Bottom line, at the time, as I said, this felt like an absolutely massive win for the Rangers. It's getting late in the season. You got to start getting some points. You got to rally out of this hole that you're in as it pertains to the playoffs. And you rally to get a very dramatic win on the road. To kind of set the stage here, kind of take you through the game, the Rangers were up 1-0 in the first period on a goal by Arthur Kaliev. And then they did that thing in the first period that they do oh so often. The Rangers give up a goal, and then they immediately give up another goal. The Jackets scored twice in the span of just 58 seconds. So think about that. This is something that was a big problem for the Rangers all season. They always were just flat out bad in the shift that followed a goal, whether they scored or whether the opposition scored. They were very, very susceptible to giving up another quick goal right after, a goal had just been scored. It happened too many times to possibly count this season. And think about this, even in an episode here where we're talking about the 5 best Ranger wins of the season, this is number 3, for my ranking. You still have a situation where they did that. They gave up the 2 goals in the span of less than a minute. Unbelievable. But anyway, we fast forward to the third period. At this point, the Rangers are down 3-2. We've got Urho Vaakanainen scoring the game-tying goal early in the third period, about 2 minutes into the third. Trocheck to Will Cuylle. Cuylle shoots, and Vaakanainen is able to deflect it home, ties the game at 3-3. Big goal for the Rangers. Then it's getting late in the third period. And at this point, look, you'll take a win any way you can get it. But you do start to think as a Ranger fan, given their spot in the standings, like, man, we got to try to win this in regulation. Like an overtime win is nice, but it would still allow Columbus to get a point. And then you don't gain as much ground as you otherwise could have. And just as soon as I'm thinking that, we get the game-winning goal by Will Cuylle with just 1:39 remaining. You got Vincent Trocheck in on the forecheck. He forces a turnover in the offensive zone for the Rangers. The puck deflects off the boards, goes right to Will Cuylle in the right circle, and Cuylle bangs it home, gives the Rangers a 4-3 lead. So Cuylle with the assist, the primary assist on the game-tying goal. Then he wins it late in the third period. Will Cuylle, one of the truly, truly few bright spots for the Rangers this past season. So another big win for the Rangers there. We move on in the countdown to number 2. I'm going to go with a 4-0 blanking of the New York Islanders on March 3rd. And yes, this was part of the infamous Calvin DeHaan era of New York Ranger hockey. This was the second of 3 games that he would play for the Rangers after being acquired in the Lindgren and Vesey trade. More on that in just a second. And obviously, the Rangers played well and went 2-0-1 in those games, and then DeHaan never played again. That's well documented. We've talked about that several times on this podcast. But for me, as far as why this win ranked so high, a couple of reasons to begin with. Another rivalry game. The Rangers absolutely just own the Islanders this season. They went 4-0 against the Islanders, and I checked this to make sure, and it is a fact. All 4 of those wins by the Rangers against the Islanders were by 3 goals or more. They just absolutely destroyed them every time they played them. So there's that aspect to it. There's also the fact where this felt like sort of the Rangers' last stand, especially looking back at everything that happened now, because you were starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, these guys can get it together, drag themselves across the finish line, and just barely eke their way into the playoffs. Even if that had happened, I don't think the Rangers were going anywhere. Just given the fact that, essentially everything we saw this season, there was no real reason to believe that they would get in and then go on some crazy Cinderella run. It just wasn't going to be in the cards this season, but at least they would get there. This is the last time really all season that I think I felt that way, because they lose the next game in overtime against the Caps. That's not a death sentence or anything like that. But then they went on a losing streak. That started a losing streak. That overtime loss against the Capitals, that began a 4-game losing streak for the Rangers. Now, 2 of them were in overtime, but who cares? You lose 4 straight games in a situation where you're barely clinging to a playoff spot and you're just barely in the mix. You're taking yourself right back out of it. So this was the last time that they played like a truly complete hockey game in a meaningful situation where you believe that it could vault them into, a playoff position at the end of the season. What was also interesting about this win for me is that this was actually the day after the trade of Jimmy Vesey and Ryan Lindgren. The day before this, the Rangers traded both of them to Colorado, and they also played later that night a game against the Nashville Predators. They also won 4-0 against the Predators and then followed it up with a 4-0 win against the Islanders. And what's crazy about that to me, maybe one of the craziest things that happened the entire season for the Rangers didn't spend their time sulking and feeling sorry for themselves after 2 of their teammates got traded. They actually showed up. They put in a good effort. They won these games. They got a couple of shutouts. They defended. They were opportunistic with their scoring. Crazy, right? We weren't used to seeing things like that from the Rangers this season. It's wild to think that they could actually just pull themselves together that quickly and win a couple of games via the shutout. But as far as some highlights from this game, Rangers got some depth scoring. I don't know. At this point, when Will Cuylle scores, do we really consider that depth scoring? Probably not, actually, because he's becoming one of the more important and just better, well-rounded players on this Ranger roster. But he did score the first goal from Zach Jones and JT Miller. The second goal was Will Borgen from Sam Carrick and Will Cooley. So a 2-point night for Will Cooley. Igor got the 21 save shutout. Again, the Rangers defended very well in this game. You know what else is funny, though? I talked about earlier, because the game right before this, number 3 on the list, how the Rangers, despite getting an important win, a convincing win, it wasn't all perfect for them. Same deal here. There was another issue that reared its head, and that was the too many men on the ice penalty. And you probably hear that and think like, oh, well, they got too many men on the ice penalty. Okay, whatever. They won 4-0. They got too many men on the ice penalties, both in the first period and less than 9 minutes apart. So again, even in a game that the Rangers win and win convincingly and win a game that is very, very important to their playoff push, they're still making those same mistakes, the kind of mistakes that plagued them the entire season and really, really cost them. I mean, it didn't cost them in this game, but you just can't play that sloppy brand of hockey night in and night out and expect that you're just going to waltz your way right into the playoffs. It's just not going to happen. As I mentioned earlier, the Rangers, this is just part of them absolutely dismantling the Islanders the entire season. Like I said, they were 4-0 against them. But what's funny about that, or actually not so funny if we're being honest, if the Islanders had won one of those 4 games against the Rangers in regulation instead of going 0-4 against them, and I did mention this in an episode where we were talking about the draft and the draft lottery, but if the Islanders had pulled that off, then that would have meant that the Islanders would have finished ahead of the Rangers in the standings, meaning the Rangers would have been in the Islander spot when it came time to do the NHL draft lottery, meaning also that the Rangers this year would have won the NHL draft lottery and would be picking first overall this upcoming draft. So that's very unfortunate to think about. And you think about also the issue that the Rangers have right now. Do they give away the number 12 pick to Pittsburgh this year, or do they hang on to it and give away their first round pick to Pittsburgh next year? It's an interesting debate. We've talked about it on here. But man, that if you win the draft lottery, I mean, you don't even have a decision to make anymore. You keep this year's pick, number 1 overall. So it would have resulted in a lot less headaches for all of us trying to figure out what the Rangers should do, with that number 12 overall pick. But be that as it may, this is still your number 2 win of the season. And in just a second, going to shift our attention to what I consider to be the best, most fun, most exciting win for the Rangers this preceding season. We will do that in just a second. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode by revealing what I consider to be, once again, the best win for the New York Rangers in 2024-2025. Quick note here. I thought about doing some honorable mentions for this, just run through a couple of, nice wins really quickly here. They don't deserve it. They don't deserve it after the season that they just had. So what I'll do this season, YouTube comment section, you guys fire away. If there's a win that I didn't mention on today's episode that you really enjoyed, that you thought was really important, maybe you even attended the game, let me know. Just let us know in the comment section. Maybe there's a couple that could have made this list, but you know what? I'm not doing any honorable mentions for these guys this season. Bottom line, here's our number 1 pick. And again, one more quick note here before I reveal it. When I set out to do this episode or whatever, started taking notes, started looking back into, everything that happened this season, trying to figure out what should be number 1, I had no idea what I was going to put here. And that's such a far cry from what we saw the season prior, because you have all those exciting playoff wins, all the dramatic, comeback wins in the regular season, overtime wins, shootout wins, whatever it might have been. I didn't know what to put here. Now, I eventually, going back and looking at everything that happened this season, came up with some good games that belonged on this top 5 list. And, hopefully some of them were good choices. Everybody's top 5 is going to be a little bit different. But I had no idea what to put here until I went back and then I saw this game, and I think this is probably the best game. Probably was the best win, the most exciting win for the Rangers this season, and that would be a 3-2 overtime win at home against the Devils on January 9th. And for full context, this is also the 3rd game in a 10-game stretch for the Rangers that saw them get a point in 10 consecutive games, saw them go 7-0-3. So this really began a really nice stretch for the Rangers. Again, one of those few positive stretches of the season where you're starting to think they can rally out of this hole, fight their way back into a playoff spot. They might actually pull it off. They might actually do it. Obviously, it didn't happen. But as far as Other reasons why this is number one. I mean, first of all, you've got the rivalry aspect, right? There's no love lost between the Rangers and the Devils, or seemingly the fan bases either. Secondly, the Rangers were so desperately in need of a win like this at this time in the season. Not just because of where they were in the standings. That's obviously part of it. But, the new year had just begun. 2025 had kicked off here. We're into January. The Rangers had just an absolutely miserable month of December. It is the worst month of hockey I can ever remember watching the New York Rangers play. Just abysmal. The record was atrocious, but beyond the record, the effort was just completely unacceptable and frankly just pathetic on a lot of nights for this New York Ranger team. And I said as much at the time. Anybody that thinks I'm exaggerating, go back and watch some of those games from December. It was absolutely brutal. But again, 2025 starts off a little better. You're into January. The Rangers started the new year with a record of 2-1-1 heading into this game. But even there, the two wins were against the Blackhawks and the Bruins, two teams that were somehow even worse than the Rangers this past season. So they weren't really convincing wins, especially the Boston win. And that was either like 3-2 or 2-1. It wasn't like a blowout win by any stretch. And the Rangers, if you look back at what they had done recently, you look at the month of December that I was just talking about, they in that month had only one win over a team that went on to make the playoffs. That was against the Stars on December 20th. And if you go back to November, the Rangers only had 2 wins against playoff teams. They beat Montreal 5-4 on November 30th. They beat Ottawa 2-1 on November 1st. And both those teams, like, wild cards, they're not like powerhouses or anything like that. I mean, the Devils aren't a powerhouse either, but they finished ahead of both those teams in the standings. But they got this win, and it was a dramatic win, to say the very least, maybe the most dramatic win of the season for the Rangers. They're down 2-1 in the third period. They get to a power play, and then you've got Adam Fox to Mika Zibanejad. Mika takes a shot from like the high slot area. The save is made. Rebound goes right to Panarin in the left circle, and he sends it home, ties the game for the Rangers at 2-2 with, once again, just 2:47 to go. We work our way into overtime, and Sam Carrick is your unlikely hero. He scored this goal before anyone even had a chance to complain about it on social media. Complain about the fact that, he was on the ice for 3-on-3 overtime. It was getting pretty late in the overtime, and the usual suspects had all already been on the ice. Jack Hughes has the puck for the Devils. He receives a pass at the top of the Ranger zone. He's moving toward the net. Sam Carrick stands him up and knocks him off the puck. It goes right to Riley Smith. And just like that, the Rangers are off to the races. Riley Smith goes up the center of the ice, maybe a little bit more to the right side, and holds the puck for as long as he can. Gave the impression that maybe he was actually going to shoot it, then makes a pass to Carrick. Carrick's waiting for it. He hammers it home. 3-2 overtime victory for the New York Rangers. Just an awesome win. And talking about this just also makes me realize and just kind of, learn all over again, I guess, just how few and far between wins like this were for the Rangers. This was such a feel-good win, such an exciting win. One of those wins where you do really start to think that, okay, this thing might actually turn. They might actually figure this out and get things going. They were in desperate need of a win like this at this point in the season, and they got it. They got it against a division rival. The Garden goes crazy. The Rangers actually looked happy after they won this game. There was an overtime win later in the season, and granted, by this point, the playoff hopes were really starting to fade away, but they got an exciting overtime win, and everybody was just kind of like, yeah, okay. Like, the excitement, the joy, the happiness just wasn't there. It was there on this night, and that was obviously nice to see in a season that was obviously very much lacking in feel-good, exciting victories such as this one. But we at least got this one against the Devils on this night back in January. But I figure we can call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchik17. Once again, that is @jchik17. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.